Is it?
There you go. We're good.
Hey everybody, my name's Trey, and to all the folks who are on my Facebook page, we're going to try to do something I've never done before, which is a Facebook Live from the Jeanine Taylor Art Gallery. I've got a show this weekend. Actually, tonight is the opening night. It's a father-daughter show. This is my daughter, Lillis. Some of you, I'm sure, have met. And we're going to try to do, just talk a little bit about what the show is about. And we have two folks here to help us get through this. So
it's easier to do on Facebook Live if you're actually with some people.
So Lillis and I, we've been doing this collaboration for 9 years. 9 years.
9 years.
And so what she basically does is she'll take my imagery and repurpose the imagery, and she'll design with it. So can you stand up here, please?
Yes. Yeah.
So she'll take and so this was from a painting that had actually a red monk in it, and so she took all the sunflowers. This red monk was in the sunflower field, and so.
And then this is birds from. He always, as you can see. In some of those paintings, there's a bird often in a painting, and so this is birds from many different paintings turned into a scarf.
Maybe you should show the Facebook folks there.
Yes.
So, so the show is called Catching the Wild Spirit, and I had an experience, and I don't know if y'all have had experiences with animals, but I had an unusual experience with a hawk many years ago. In 2001, I had just quit my job as a scientist, and I had discovered art pretty late in life. And within 2 years, I had quit my job and got an invitation to have a show in Japan, which was another story. But while I was there, I had 3 months to prepare for this show, and when I got there, and so the man who had invited me, he was an artist, a potter, and we were going to collaborate, and so it was perfect. You know, I had this studio, had this beautiful apple orchard in the back behind the studio, and it was out in the country, and it was just like, oh man, this is going to be great. And the first 2 months, I can't paint. I am just, you know, I've got a show it's really going to be kind of my first show. I've been in some group shows, but I just froze up with fear, and nothing is coming. And so about 2 months into it, I was going to the studio, and I was just really racking my head trying to come up with some ideas. And time is ticking. And he also had me helping him with some other things. He was preparing for a wood fire festival. He was a potter. So I was spending time doing that. So one night he comes in, his name was Ryoji. He comes in and he says, Trey, why aren't you painting? I said, it's not because I don't want to paint, it's just that I can't come up with an idea, and I'm so sorry you spent all this money, and I should never have quit my job. And it was just, you know, feeling really pretty scared. And he just sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, you know, why don't you just take a walk tomorrow through the woods, this beautiful forest here, and maybe God will give you something for your art. And so I thought, that's an idea. I hadn't thought about it. It's a really good idea. So the next day, I was sitting in my studio, and I brought these books with me. And one of the books I had was this book about angels. And I was just sitting there, I'd kind of forgotten what he had suggested. I was sitting there reading this book. And I was reading a story about this woman's relationship with crows. And for her, these crows always came at important times, so they were sort of messengers for her. And then I sort of hear this little, I had the thought, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be sitting here reading, you're supposed to be out walking. So I close the book, and I go out to the back of the studio, and Lillis actually was there that same time.
Yeah.
So she's going to confirm.
It was very inspiring for me. I was doing all kinds of stuff.
So I walk out into the apple orchard, and I find this little path, this trail, and it goes up to the top of this mountain. And it took about 20 minutes or so to get up to the top. It was cherry trees blooming. It was really beautiful. It was in spring. And I come to the top of the mountain, and I'm looking out across this valley, and I'm thinking, this is just really beautiful up here. And there was a hut up at the top there. And so I went into the hut, and I just sort of sat in there, and I said, you know, I decided, oh, I should do a little prayer here. And so I said, you know, I could use a little help here, and because nothing is coming. Could I just have a sign? I prayed for a sign, and then the wind sort of blows, and is that a sign? And actually, it turns out you'll see that it really is, but it was too subtle for me to understand. But so I decide, okay, I've done my walk. I need to run back and get to the studio. And then I caught myself, and I said, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be out here having this walk. So I started studying, you know, it was at a time of the day where this light was coming down through the treetops. And I remember this forest floor was just almost like it was on fire. It was just so beautiful with this orange light. And these ferns were, you know, these beautiful ferns almost looked like they were on fire. I was just amazed by this sort of natural beauty, and where I was standing on the top of the hill was I was at the top, and the trail descended down, and in my peripheral vision, I see something moving, and I'm studying to see what it was, and I can see that, I don't know, about 15 feet away from me, I see a toad, and it's hopping across the path. And so I said, oh, look at that, you know, let's look at that. And so I walked down, and the toad has crossed the path, and in arm's length of where the toad stopped was a feather. And I was like, wow, look at that. It's so, you know. So I reach down, I pick up the feather, and as soon as I pick up the feather, I can't do it now, but I hear this whistling, and I'm studying, like what? Where is that coming from? And I see through the trees, not treetop level, but like through the forest, sort of in a distance, I see something flying. And it's large. It's a large bird. And then it disappears. I don't see it anymore. I'm just thinking, what the hell was that? I mean, is there some kind of connection here? You know? So I'm just sitting there, and I'm just really thinking about this. And then all of a sudden, that ceiling's what? 12 feet high or so, 15. It's a hawk, and it has circled around, and it is flying right above me, and it's just squawking, and it's screaming, and it's, you know, that's a crow, but anyway. And I'm looking, and I start, well, I've got your tail feather. And this hawk is, and it's just, you know, it's flying, and it's just hovering above me. And I am just amazed at this experience I'm having with this animal, this bird, and it kind of stimulated this sort of sense of, I am experiencing something supernatural here. You know, it was almost a sense of awe here, and it actually had tears coming down my cheeks of this just sort of joy of this experience. And then all of a sudden this thing, it felt like maybe 15 minutes, it was probably 30 seconds, but it felt like a long time. And then it flies off, and I am just, what was that? I am so amazed by this. So now I run back to the studio. I had you know Joseph Campbell? He was a mythologist. I love his reading and stuff, but he studies a lot about animals and mythology. And so I had brought one of his books, and I'm just thinking, you know, what was that? I mean, and I just grabbed one of his books, I open it, just randomly open it to start looking, and I thought, well, let's start here. And I open it to this Native American standing beside a stream. And I read in the first paragraph, we of the Western cultures have lost touch with the magical forces of the plants and animals, you know, that the Native Americans have understood for hundreds, thousands of years. And I at that point, I'm just like, oh my God. And so I had this rice paper. They put them into shoji doors. They're Japanese doors. Mm-hmm. And I had these like scrolls of paper, and they're about a foot wide and I don't know, 30 feet. And I just unfurl it. And I had black India ink and some watercolors that they use in their lighted paintings. And it's almost like paint is pouring out. I am so inspired. This is where my first monk was made, was here. And so I'm just starting and just making these little, they had these little statues called jizos that are like little Buddha kind of figures that you see on the sides of the roads. And they would always be praying, and the women would always put little shawls on them. So that little character is kind of coming up into my, in fact, yeah. So those little, see the bald-headed monks over there? That's kind of an example of where my first monks were coming from. And so, and I'm writing stuff that I've been reading, like Buddhist sayings and Sufi sayings and Christian mystics and Rumi poetry, and it's just, it's just flowing out. It's just coming. And so that night, I sort of passed out from working so hard, and my bed had a window facing to the back where the apple orchard was. And so I had left the window open, and the next morning, I get up, look out the window, and the hawk is sitting in a dead tree out in the back where the apple orchard is. And I get up, I'm in my underwear, and I go out the back, and and it flies over, and it does this little thing above me, and it kind of flies over here to another tree, and I sort of follow it, and then it, and so we're doing this sort of like, okay, I'll follow you. And then eventually it kind of sort of came to where the path went back up to the hill, and then it just flies off. And I went, well, I don't know if you're trying to tell me something, but I'm going to go up to the top of the mountain and give thanks for what has just been happening here. So I go up to the top in my underwear and climb up there, give thanks, and come back. And so for the next 30 days, I am writing to, I got to every day, every morning, that hawk would be up in the tree and whistling, and I'd come out and greet it, and then I'd go back to work, and I got to the point where I could call the hawk with that whistle. I could do it a lot better back then.
A newspaper came out and did a story about the crazy gaijin and his hawk friend.
And so I'm writing to my wife. She's not my wife at that time, but I'm writing to her. I said, you would not believe what is going on here. And I'm telling you, you don't need to put lithium in my coffee, because I'm telling you, this is a true story. And she would write, oh, that's just me making sure you're going to work. But so every day, the hawk, 30 days, the show was called Love Letters to God. I was going to put these long scrolls on helium balloons. And then people would come out and cut their, painting out of these scrolls, but that was too impractical. So we just put these scrolls all through the studio, through this gallery where the show was. But the night before we hung the show, my wife flies in. She's not my wife, I'm Helene. And I'm so excited about not only hanging the show, but that she's going to get to see the hawk. Yeah. The next day, no hawk.
Wow.
And they spent the entire night hanging the show. She came in and helped him put the entire show up. And then the next morning, no hawk.
But I knew that no one would ever believe this story, so I had a Korean come out with me and film me calling the hawk. And I was just watching this video the other day. It's pretty cool. But so here's the amazing thing about this whole story is that so after the show, I stayed there for about a month or so. I can't remember. You left. You left with Helene, right? And so they go home, and then not too long after, I'm wrapping things up, and I go back home. And I'd been living in San Diego, and I basically came back to San Diego, packed up, moved back to Birmingham. And while I was in Birmingham, after Helene and I back, together, and about 2 or 3 months later, I'm thinking, what is the Native American thing about hawks? What's there to learn about that? So I put in a search, and I click on the first thing, and the first thing that I open says, hawk. It's a messenger from God, and its purpose is to pull the creative spirit out of a person. So 10 years later, after that, I knew that experience was going to have to be painted, but it wasn't going to be one painting. So what I ended up doing 10 years later is there's these triangular shaped monks, when they're facing, there's one behind you there. You see, if you were looking down at that like it's a cookie cutter from a bird's eye view, so I built a structure that was 45 feet in length, and you walk into the belly of the monk, and wrapped along the edge of the inside it was a 100-foot painting of this story I just told you. And the name of the show was called Amaze, which was obviously a little pun there. But and then after that, 10 years of having done that, one day I'm in a festival, an art festival, which is basically how I go around and sell art. I'm telling the story to a customer, and the person goes, well, what about the toad? And I went, the lowly toad. I forgot about the lowly toad. So we did a little Google search. Toad, it's a heralder. It points to what's coming in the future.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, I do take lithium, and no, I don't, but this is enough to make someone take lithium. I mean, and so anyway, all joking aside, the Native Americans and a lot of indigenous cultures, they've understood this, and Joseph Campbell writes about this, and that is that there is something out there beyond our physical understanding of this world, and animals, I think, are, and so this show here, Catching the Wild Spirit, is now, I like to write little stories about this character, William Guadalupe, and so he is, basically on this kind of collection, on a quest to find out what is freedom. And so he comes to each animal, and every animal has a different idea of what freedom is. So if you start on the very end, there's a cougar, and the cougar or actually a panther. These are all supposed to be sort of Floridian or Florida animals. And so the monk says, what is freedom? And the panther says, you must face your fears. That's freedom, with courage and strength and wisdom. The next one he comes to is an alligator, and the alligator, when asked what is freedom, says, freedom is using your imagination. That's what freedom comes to. And then the theme of the show, Catching the Wild Spirit, the monk comes to the white horse and says, what is freedom? And the horse says, you have to catch the wild spirit and never let go. So that's freedom for the horse. And then the tortoise, the spirit animal, the tortoise for Native American totems is, they represent peace, kind of, the acceptance and peace. And so the monk, when he comes to the tortoise says, well, freedom is accepting, you have to accept things in life in order to walk a path of peace. And so, and then the last one is the wise old owl. And so, by the way, the reason why I did them in these sort of maroon and then these color maroon, it's sort of night and day. night and days, or so animals at night and then animals in the day. And it's just to do the sort of 24-hour thing too. And then the last one is the owl. And when the monk asks what is freedom, the owl says, you must embrace the unknown. And that's where freedom comes. You know? And then the last one is when he's the hummingbird, which happens to be his totem, and the hummingbird represents gratitude, and the hummingbird says you must be grateful and drink from the sweet nectar, and joyfully drink from the sweet nectar of life, and that is freedom. And so, do you have anything you want to talk about?
Well, I was with my dad when he had that experience with the hawk, and that was before I had started doing any of the textiles. So I take his imagery and I design clothing and textiles with it. So we started in 2010. I moved back to Birmingham, and he said, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And I said, I would take your imagery and put it on clothes. It totally needs to be on clothing. And so he said, go figure it out. And I have an industrial design background, so we did a bunch of research to figure out how to transfer the imagery. But we've done several father-daughter shows now. We actually did one here at Jeanine Taylor's 6 years ago. And at that time, I was just kind of figuring out a lot of things, and it's interesting how far this journey has evolved. I don't know, I really enjoy it. And I love seeing the new paintings, because then it's like, oh, I can't wait to put that on something. And, you know, it's a lot of fun. It's very inspiring for me. I don't know, do you guys have any questions?
All I can say is welcome back.
Thank you.
It's been a long time. It's nice to have you here again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's good to be
beautiful
back.
stuff.
Thank you,
My
Ken.
mother ordered a dress.
Good.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's always, you know, the way I make my living is we basically have to do art festivals around the country. And so when I get to do a one-man show, or, you know, father-daughter show in a gallery, it's a place where I can, okay, you know, really sort of think about a story and something to say, other than just working hard and making art that is beautiful, but it's not like I like to do installations. So it's kind of,
Very nice.
Thank you, thank you. Do you guys have spirit animals?
We have a house full of spirits.
Yeah.
All shapes and sizes. Yes, we do. And you have truly embraced your father's art. It's just because we were here years ago, and you were so cute, so sweet, and you had these wonderful pillows,
Yeah,
small things.
Right.
But I was thinking, it's really ironic. I was thinking to myself, the art that you were presenting at the time.
Oh, you were thinking, why doesn't she utilize that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know.
Well, you know, this gentleman, he works up to the last minute, so sometimes it's hard to get that imagery.
Catch the wild spirit.
Yeah.
Well, she's done an amazing job. I mean, this whole sculptural thing that she's doing with the textile, you know, I said, go do something that's different, and kind of in the last week, she decided, okay, I'm gonna show you what I've been working on, and I just went, wow, these are great, and I love them. I think they really capture a certain vibe. And
he's given me a lot more imagery. I can't wait for each of those animals on the big mural to be sculptures, three-dimensional sculptures.
But I'm trying to get her to bring her own art in too, because while we collaborate, she also has her art, and maybe we will twist her arm and have her maybe leave some of them here for the.
It is an interesting, once you figure out the process of putting imagery on the textile and then what you want to do with it, for me, it's always been, I like processes, and so it was good to have his imagery to play with, you know? It's just so easy.
Well, I hope it's not 6 years again before we see you.
Yes.
Well,
What's that?
I hope it's not 6 years again before we see you.
Yeah, that's going to be up to Jeanine.
Wow.
It probably takes about 6 years of her to like go, okay, I'm done with the lab.
recuperate
To
from the
recuperate.
Taylors.
So
Anyway, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Facebook, and thank you all.
yeah, thank you for coming, and thank you,
Come
Bailey.
tonight.
Yeah.
Come tonight.
At
6 to
Jeanine
9.
Taylor, and if you're in the Orlando, Sanford, Winter Park area, any other places we should mention in the neighborhood? Just Sanford, Florida. Just
Yeah.
come. I'd love to tell you some more stories
He's got lots of them.
about animals and things like that. So thank you.